Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Pittsburgh City Council's Cablecast Post Agenda on the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh Section 8 program as it relates to landlords and landlord services. Today is Wednesday, October 30th. For the record, we are joined today by council members Deborah Gross, Erica Strasburger, and Robert Charlin. Thank you, members, for joining. And so just a little bit of sort of set the stage for why we've called this post agenda today. Obviously, we have all heard a lot about the affordability, the affordable housing crisis here in Pittsburgh, and the Section 8 voucher program is key to helping us solve that problem. So what we want to explore today, we have guests from the Housing Authority, and then we have some landlords who are going to join us in the second half. They'll come up. We're sort of short on chairs. So to just kind of discuss, first of all, the work that the Housing Authority has been doing over the past year with regards to the voucher program and Section 8, and some new information that might be interesting to landlords across the city, and also to then have the folks who are current landlords in various capacities with different types of landlords, different types of units, and to hear a little bit about their experience with the Section 8 voucher program. And I would say, hopefully the end goal for everyone is to encourage as many landlords as possible to take advantage of the voucher program, and also for folks who are looking into building new housing and new developments to also take advantage of the voucher programs in so far as they can help create affordable housing in those developments, while also helping pay for that housing, right? So that developers do not need to take a haircut, so to speak, when they're putting their financing together. So with that, I will, if members are comfortable, I will let the team from the Housing Authority introduce themselves and then give a presentation.
Okay, my name is Amanda Hauer, Senior Project Manager in the Operations Department.
My name is Castor Ben. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh.
Hi, my name is LaShawna Hammond. I am the Director of the Housing Choice Voucher Program.
Hello, my name is Melissa Burton. I'm the HQS Inspections Manager for the Housing Choice Voucher Program.
Good afternoon, Marsha Grayson, Chief Operations Officer for the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh.
Okay, you ready?
Yes, LaShawna will start.
Okay. Thank you. So this presentation will be showing the benefits and the progress made in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So the Housing Choice Voucher Program is a rental subsidy program that provides affordable, safe housing to seniors and disabled family members in the private market. Some of the benefits of participating in the Housing Choice Voucher Program includes preventing homelessness, poverty, safer neighborhoods for families, and safer schools for children within those low-income families. The housing assistant payment contract starts the process for the families that are participating in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Voucher holders that come onto the program or would like to transfer to a new unit or issue vouchers to move, those vouchers are good for 180 days. Within that time frame of the voucher issuance, both the landlord and the tenant, once the tenant finds suitable housing, both landlord and tenant would need to complete a request for tenancy approval, which starts the inspection process. Once the request for tenancy approval is submitted, the inspector goes out to the unit to make sure that it's safe under HUD guidelines. Once the unit passes inspection, It is then forwarded to a housing specialist to prepare a contract. The contract can take from 1 to 60 days. Once the contract is processed, it is then sent out for signage between the housing authority and the landlord. Currently, the HCV department is processing all documents within the stated timelines. If for whatever reason there's a delay due to the housing authority not meeting the timelines, we do pay settlement payments to landlords that may experience a delay in processing. I will now turn it over to the Housing Quality Standard Manager, Ms. Burton.
Hello. I'm going to speak about landlord participation with the Housing Choice Voucher Program. The Housing Choice Voucher Department, we do monthly meetings every second Thursday of the month with our current landlords. During the meeting, we talk about the inspection process, how to process for new contracts, rent increases, how to report a change of ownership, and the different payment standards. We also talk about the landlord portal that we have on board to assist the landlords in navigating, and they can go into the portal and find out how much payments that are made, direct deposit, when the inspections are due, and any past inspections. The Housing Choice Voucher inspection staff includes a housing liaison position to assist the landlords in navigating the program. And I just talked about the Housing Choice Voucher Department has a HACP landlord portal and a RAFTA Adobe website to streamline the process for landlords while they're implementing the RAFTA. We're going to do the landlord portal demonstration is it's an online process that gives the landlord a way to, like I said, navigate their units. They'll be able to go into and see their units online, and it goes into direct deposits, any checks that were received, again, any inspections that are upcoming, past inspections, and the results of those inspections.
All right, now I'm going to talk about the payment standards. Payment standards are the role that they play with the vouchers is that it's the maximum amount of assistance that the family can receive, and it's based on the unit census tract, fair market rent, and funding from HUD. And it's really important because it's used in the calculation of how much the housing authority is going to pay to the owner on behalf of the family and what the tenant portion of the rent will be. And the HCV payment standard effects. So it's a common misconception that the payment standard is the maximum rent that the landlord can charge, both the housing authority and the tenant. However, it's not. The landlord can request any rent amount. We give them some guidance based on the payment standards and what utilities the tenant is responsible for paying, but it's ultimately up to the owner or landlord to request what they want for the unit. And the lower the payment standard, the more rent the tenant pays. And I have an example in this slideshow showing that if the payment standard is lower, the tenant rent portion in this example is differing by over $400. So it's pretty significant to make sure that your payment standards are aligned with the market. And here is a chart of our payment standards for 2024. These payment standards are pretty scientific. We've put in over 2 years of research and development and coming up with them. The methodology is new as of October 2022. And what we do is we look at American Community Survey 5-year estimates. Census tracts in the city of Pittsburgh are then sorted into one of 6 payment standard tiers based on how far at or below their all better median gross rent fell from the Allegheny County's all better median gross rent. And then the tracts were set at a given percentage at or above HUD's fair market rent, which they calculate every year. and we sort them into the tier based on the percentage. And the tier range is 110% to 160% of HUD's fair market rent. The normal housing authority sets it around 100 to 110%. So ours are substantially higher. And to find out what tier your unit is located in, we have a website that's connected to the payment standard charts we have posted on our website. You just type in the unit address and it will show you the tier and the payment standard dollar amounts. And I also wanted to mention we have a higher payment standard if a unit is fully accessible, and it's available on our website, and the owner would have to apply for that. And here's just a quick comparison of the payment standard in 2024 versus the average market cost. We did a study this summer, one of our interns, and she found that our payment standard was higher than the average market cost 71% of the time. And here's the same data, but in chart format, so you can see that it's pretty close to the market for 2024. And that will conclude our presentation. We encourage anybody interested about information on the HCV program to visit our landlord resources page on our website, hacp.org. Or if there are other questions, please contact Melissa, Miss Burton, who is here today, and our contact information's on the screen.
Okay, I do have a few questions. I'm trying to think, because I'd like the landlords to come, and then we can ask. Well, I guess before we do that, would you just explain, just briefly, perhaps, Director Binion, the difference between, tenant-based vouchers, project-based vouchers, and how those work, like how you work with, yeah.
So tenant vouchers are vouchers that tenants can get. They get put on a wait list, and the wait lists have preferences. And depending on your preference, you get a number. I think we probably have about 10,000 people on the waiting list right now that we are processing. They can take those vouchers anywhere. You must live in the city for at least 1 year to be able to take those vouchers to another city or state or somewhere else. The project-based vouchers are assigned to the unit. And what we've been doing here at the Housing Authority to address affordable housing, we create a program we call gap financing. Gap financing is set up so that if you get a 4% tax credit, you can get up to about $120,000 per unit on the project base. On the 9%, I think it was up to about $1 million. By doing this, what happened is to build affordable housing in the city of Pittsburgh roughly costs about $5,000. Correction, $500,000. And so this program, unique to Pittsburgh that we have created, we are able to triple the amount of houses that we can provide. Now, right now, I'm kind of proud to say that maybe every month, we have a ribbon cutting or a groundbreaking because so many houses that are coming online due to this program. The project-based vouchers, a person or a company, they must submit a proposal. It's a competitive bid process. We have two programs, the project-based program without gap financing, that is out every 90 days. The one with gap financing is once a year. And the Housing Authority, we talk to anyone who want to talk about it. Some people, I meet with people weekly to talk about how to use the project-based vouchers. And you take the project vouchers, if you get awarded by the Housing Authority, you take those vouchers, and you take them to the bank, and you borrow money, and we will put a 40-year affordability requirements on those vouchers. I guess any questions related to those programs?
I think at this point I'd like to ask the landlords to come. okay for you? I just want to make sure that folks are able to answer their questions. So why don't we have, let's see,
Me,
if we could free up, we've got 2 chairs, so if we could
Marcia,
free up
okay.
1 chair.
Marcia here, you two can go, okay.
Okay.
All right.
If our,
okay.
if our esteemed landlords would like to come up to the table. Okay, thank you. Thank you all so much for coming, for taking the time to come today. So I'll just have you each introduce yourselves, and then I'll have each of you, I know we all spoke on the phone sort of one-on-one, and I'll, take a few minutes to just sort of explain the type of, the type of unit that you either own or manage, and then sort of your experiences, positive and otherwise. We'd like to hear about them. So we'll start with just introductions. Yeah.
My name is Deborah Clark. I'm a landlord in the South Side.
Okay.
I have a single housing unit that I take and manage.
So you have 1 unit?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Kendall Pelling. I'm Executive Director of Rising Tide Partners. We're a nonprofit that works to prevent displacement in Pittsburgh by buying out absentee landlords and preserving affordable housing. So we control about 164 rental units at this point that are in the path of rental occupancy. 41 of those are Section 8 units that currently have Section 8 tenants. And then we have project-based voucher commitments from the Housing Authority for approximately 78 units.
Okay.
We're working to bring that subsidy to existing tenants and to vacant units as well. Sorry. And so, yeah, we can get into the things that are going well and things that could use some improvement.
Okay, great.
My name is Glenn Williams. I'm the Executive Director of SEED, 6 Economic Empowerment Development. We have 37 units in the East Liberty section that are all under project-based vouchers.
Okay. Okay, great. So, Ms. Clark, would you like to start?
Thank you all.
Sure.
Some of the issues that I have found being a landlord is the unit occupancies problems. Lease violations have continued a great deal. Right now, I'm on my 3rd house choice voucher person, and I'm having the same issues that I've had with the first 2. I have addressed them and work with the Housing Authority to try and get them resolved. I've learned a lot. I'm on their landlord group meetings that we have every Thursday. So I've gotten a lot of education in regards to what process goes through and how they have to deal with certain things. There's a lot of things that we need to work on together to improve the situation. It's getting there. It's getting there. It is.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So on the nonprofit side, what we see is that this Housing Authority has made some good progress in making some changes to their landlord portal so that now rent increases can be processed through the portal instead of involving a bunch of paperwork. And they've also has been better since the Housing Authority went back to tenants having their own assigned housing specialist. So now tenants can have that relationship with their housing specialist, and they are better able to know who to connect with. There can sometimes be a challenge when a housing specialist leaves the authority, and then the tenants need to go to a new housing specialist and establish a new relationship. And the tenant doesn't always know who that person is. We've seen their new inspection manager as being responsive to us getting inspections scheduled. But one of our greatest challenges is that we're finding it takes 4 months to get from submitting a request for tenancy approval to getting the inspection scheduled in our unit. So I think the core, if I was going to take most of the feedback and roll it up together, is communications issues. Communications that rely on individuals and staff to call a landlord back or a housing specialist to tell a landlord where it's at in the process. Paperwork gets lost between the tenant not getting it or missing it or not being on top of it. Whereas some of those notifications could happen through a system so that the landlord could be kept always up to date, whether something was sent to the tenant needs to do, and the landlord can follow up with the tenant. Because it's a complex process to get a new tenant into a unit, to make sure they've done all their paperwork right with the housing authority and the unit paperwork is all right. So I think that's the core start of it, is to say that there's improvements that can be done on the communication process to reduce the amount of time that it practically takes to get a new tenant in, and that there's other system probably improvements that could help make that easier on the authority. And I think one of the things that's been exciting has been some of the good staff within the Section 8 department who are moving things, who are calling back. Our property manager mentioned Ellen Dreher as being amazing and getting right back to her. And these are the heroes of affordable housing who day by day respond and move the process forward in times that are not always easy. But then we've seen a lot of turnover within the Section 8 department. And so I think it could use some more attention to say, what does it take to help make this department and these roles be really attractive roles that are rewarding for the employees who are there, so that they're paid well, benefits, time off, work culture, all the things are working so that we keep these good employees and don't have staff turnover.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Williams?
All right. As I said previously, we have 37 units, and all 37 of our units are based from the property voucher program, which requires that all of our tenants in our program have to come from housing authority. My biggest problem is coming into this program, we thought that, having housing authority, paying good percentage of our rent was a positive on our side. But in some instances, to us, it seems to be a failure. And on some instances, for example, from December of 22 to April of 24, we've had 5 3-bedroom units that were unoccupied at a cost of $40,800 to us. We did not get tenants from the housing authority. We never got names from the housing authority. And there was a flurry of emails going back and forth, requesting tenants and telling us, to a point where on August 11th, we got an email from Housing Authority Occupancy Department literally telling us, we don't have any more tenants for you. And then they turned around, because our response to them was, well, if you're saying you don't have any tenants for us, why is our list closed? And last week you told us you were searching your list to give us tenants. So that's the problem we've been having in terms of that. And I mean, and just a more recent incident is we've had a 2-bedroom unit where the tenant bowed out in June. The tenant got put out of the program in June, was supposed to move in June 1st. Since June 1st, we have been requesting names for a 2-bedroom unit and still have not gotten a name for a 2-bedroom unit. They sent us a name last month, and that person was supposed to be a 3-bedroom unit. So I've gone from June to present with a vacant unit that I have nobody to put in, and I don't have the ability to go to the street and pull in tenants. All my tenants have to come from them.
Okay. Folks at the Housing Authority, would you like to respond to any of these issues? And then I think we can go into questions.
Yes,
Just give you a chance.
Glenn, we talk on the phone, the situation you just discussed. I don't think I had a conversation with you about the folders, but we had conversation about tenants. And so we can discuss that more in detail. And then in addition to that, the residents that come to your place, have you been sending referrals to us?
Excuse me?
Have you been sending referrals to us, of people that walk out the street and just want to apply for your place?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna have a deeper conversation. I didn't know about this part in the conversation that we had. We talked about other things that I work with you on.
Yes.
This is new to me personally. Could be new to it might be old to my staff, but I just hope that, I try to work one-on-one with landlords to solve problems, and this one is new to me as far as you getting folders. As far as, just give a little background. I think about 2 years ago, the Housing Authority, we removed the whole staff, almost 80% of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We had to reboot. We had a whole lot of problems. We had a whole lot of complaints. And so we restarted. We hired a whole lot of new people. They had to go through transition to learn this program, probably take 2 years. We was able to reduce it to 6 months. We were in the process of processing maybe 50 or less contracts per month. I think today what are we up to today?
123.
120, well, the day's not over, but now we're up to 100 plus contracts. Majority of all our contracts are processed less than 60 days. I think we might have just a couple that we're still working with. We have reduced our inspection time. And I know you kind of ask why it takes so much time, because as the landlords know, this relationship is among the landlord, the tenant, and the housing authority. All of us must do our parts. Sometimes, because we are compliance situations where residents must comply. If they can't comply, then we are unable to issue the voucher for them. But I do feel, as a day, we are moving in the right direction. For the last 15 months, we was kind of going through transition, but I feel that I have a super staff now, and the morale is high. They're processing contracts in a very rapid way. They interact with their landlords, and it's not perfect, but it's a long ways from 15 months ago.
I just
So,
want
go ahead.
to add to two things, a clarification question you asked, the distinction between project-based and tenant-based vouchers. One of the items that Mr. Williams highlighted shows what the distinction is. So with the tenant-based voucher, as a tenant, I can go anywhere and go to a landlord and say, I want to rent this unit. Part of the issue that Mr. Williams is experiencing is that we have approximately 33,000 people on the project-based waiting list. With that said, hypothetically, if all of us here at this table were project-based buildings, I could be on this list, this list, this list, this list, and this list, which makes the list so large. In reality, it's not. It's just people, whatever bedroom size they qualify for, that's what they do. And as it pertains to the waiting list, once the entity, the developer, lets us know that they are going to have a vacancy, then we can try to process those vacancies. So we don't know, out of the developers, we don't know when you have a vacant unit. A lot of the project-based vouchers, a lot of the project-based buildings have LIHTC, and so there are certain requirements. So when our occupancy department filters somebody for eligibility, depending on what that composition is, it could be 50%. They may have somebody that has to have 50% AMI. They may have to have two people that are 20%. All that comes into play with being able to assign units and who's eligible for the units. And because there's so many people on all these different waiting lists, when I get to maybe Miss Clark, she's decided, no, I don't want to, go here. I want to go there instead. And so we have a large percentage of people who we take off of the waiting list because they have withdrawn. So it's a very complicated situation. The last thing I want to say about that is that we have some developers who do their own eligibility. So while the Housing Authority processes eligibility for our HUD program, the landlord and a private developer has the opportunity to say, well, I want this certain criteria of people, as long as they don't discriminate against voucher holders and non-voucher holders. So if Mr. Binion is a marketplace person and I am a housing choice voucher, a subsidized person, they have to have the same second screening criteria for both of us. So landlords can do that, and a lot of our developers do that, and a lot of people that we send over to them, they will reject those people for various reasons that they have. The other thing that I wanted to state is that Mr. Binion had talked about our percentage. So right now, we have 142 participants, applicants, I should state, on the Housing Choice Voucher waiting list for tenant-based vouchers. Of that number, there are only 5 that are over 60 days. And a lot of those, we're waiting for information from the tenant. I meet with the HCV staff every morning at 8:30. Ms. Hammond can attest to that. And we have worked hard together to get those numbers down, to hold people accountable. As Mr. Binion stated, that we had a turnover of staff, so we are doing everything that we can to move in the right direction. And I've taken notes to look at some of the other suggestions that have been made. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess bottom line, Housing Authority, we went through some changes. We are improving. I believe that among the 3 landlords, they will say that. We're not there yet, but I feel we're going to get there pretty shortly. I feel we have the right staff. We have improved the payment standards to address the landlord's concerns. We went to HUD and asked for special programs to deal with Pittsburgh. This tier system is unique to Pittsburgh. Normally, they would say, HUD would say your FMRs at 100%, and that what you pay. We're going from 100% all the way to 160%. And the funny thing about it is, would you believe that the Housing Authority payment standards are above the market? That was on purpose. I'll put it that way. But as we came out of the pandemic, some of the things that we had regarding staff, getting organized, getting back into our new building, which I had staff working everywhere, but there's no excuses. But the bottom line is, the Housing Authority is working hard to get people into houses, work with landlords. We have a landlord committee that we work with. They gave us some great suggestions. And then we go back to HUD, request that we can change our regulations and policies to accommodate the landlords and tenants in the city of Pittsburgh. Yeah, and I'm glad that these landlords are here so we can continue to improve our program.
Great, thanks everyone. So with that, I will open it up to members. I will just go down the line. Councilwoman Gross, you want to start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. So thank you all for being here. I always say these post agendas are great education for both council members, but also for the public. And it's just a little more help with vocabulary, since this is not the topics I deal with every day. When we're talking here between the tenant-based voucher systems and the project-based voucher systems, and that was kind of just a helpful way, I think, for everybody to remember, right, that the tenant-based voucher travels with the tenant, even out of state, right, if they've lived in the city of Pittsburgh for a year. Mm-hmm. And then the project-based voucher stays with the unit.
Correct.
When we're saying Section 8, is that only for the tenant-based vouchers? Or Section 8 both?
It's all under the CFR. It's the Code of Regulations, and that particular portion that deals with the program is called Section 8. That's where the
That's
term
in the section
comes
of
from.
the federal code or the HUD
it's
code?
Section 8 of the 1937 Housing Act.
Got it.
And we
We're
call it
used
the
to dealing with
Housing
that.
Choice Voucher Program now, is the more modern day
Not
term.
Section 8, the housing
Yeah, but they're
choice
interchangeable.
voucher
Well,
program,
maybe
but they're
not.
both under there.
No,
Let me say this.
they're
Let
not
me
the-
see what-
okay.
Yes.
So, years ago, we used to call our projects, our developments, we used to call them projects, which was a negative.
I remember my mom lived
Yes.
in the projects.
Right. So now we call them developments. Okay. Same with Section 8. So Section 8 stigma attached to it. Now we call it Housing Choice Voucher Program.
Wait,
To
but I'm
highlight
still
the
confused.
choice.
Which one's which? So there's the tenant vouchers, right? But like if you've built affordable housing, that again, like in the 50s was the projects in Allegheny County. Which ones are those now?
That's still low-income public housing. That's
Okay.
under low-income
Okay.
public housing.
Okay.
Yeah. And we normally call those developments. Like Northview, that's a development. It's not a project anymore. At least we won't use that word
Okay.
anymore.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And just for clarification, the low-income public housing, we own and manage those.
Yes. Got it. Right. And we've talked about that before when you've been here for your budget hearings, and that's a whole other separate can of worms with the that there's been progress on with the fur cloth limits, right?
Yeah, the fur cloth. Right.
Yes. Okay, so back to the Section 8. I've been trying to keep notes, and you mentioned several kinds of waiting lists. Could you just go back over those before? So if I have a constituent who's signed up to get like the tenant-based voucher, the waiting list for the tenant-based vouchers are?
It's the number you're asking, it's approximately 11,000, and that waiting list is closed. We opened it earlier this year, and we had it open for about a week, 24/7. Electronically, you could go in and apply, and then, so that waiting list is currently closed. And then we have the tenant the project-based waiting list. And basically, Mr. Williams had touched base on this, but one of the best practice rules that HUD states is that basically if you can't house someone within hypothetically a period of 12 months, then you should close that waiting list because it kind of gives false hope. And so that's why a lot of our waiting lists are closed. Our occupancy department is the department that does the eligibility portion of it. And so what they have been doing to unclog the waiting list is they have been sending out, "Are you still interested?" letters. So basically, we have to do everything by date and time of the application, whether it's a project-based application or whether it's a tenant-based application. Everything is by date and time. So if I'm number 500 on the waiting list, I may be on 3 different waiting lists. I could be on the low-income public housing waiting list for any number of the properties. I could be on the housing choice voucher, #Section 8 waiting list. And I could also be on the tenant, the project-based waiting list. And we have, a plethora of developers who have project-based. So I can be on any of those
Could be
waiting
20 plus.
lists. Yeah, I think it's about 33
Right.
that we have. So I can be on any of those waiting lists. And what our
You don't know,
occupancy...
you don't dedupe them. You don't know how many people are duplicates.
No.
I mean,
We can
can't-
find
we
out,
can't-
different
but
software, yeah.
We can do that, but
Just it's not really an issue. It's not
yeah,
really an issue, but I'm
it's
just
just that somebody might come on the list and then they might put 3 down there, and then they say, "Well, I might not want that one when it comes up because
which
they
is
might
great,
want to
which
wait."
is great,
Yeah,
right,
It's
absolutely.
a choice, right?
But the
I
point was that
wouldn't
we
want people
purged the
to-
list so
We
that
constantly purge every year.
constantly purging, and that's why they're closed, to purge them, because
So
a
you
lot
shouldn't
of
get them
people are
back
saying,
open.
"Are you still interested?"
Yeah.
So I may not be interested anymore, so then we will withdraw that person so that we could get to the people further down on the waiting list.
So to the project-based vouchers, how many units have vouchers in the city right now?
Amanda,
Kendall
do you-
has 78. And Mr. Williams has 37.
that list.
So let me just clarify, you're asking
pull
the
the cheat
number
sheet.
of project-based vouchers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because those stay with the units.
Yes,
So
we
there's
have,
a certain number of units.
correct. There are over 1,000 project-based vouchers existing right now.
Is it like 1,999 or is it like
We can-
1,001?
We can give you a list.
Yep.
And we give you a list of all the ones, and then also we can give you the list of, I think we have 4. We constantly, because of the gap finance program, adding to the list.
Great.
And so we will provide you that information probably next 2 days. And we
That'd be
get that
great.
to you. And it would, and also would depict where all these project-based vouchers are located in the city.
Yes.
And also the developments. Some of the developments you see in the city, you will be surprised that we have project-based vouchers in them.
Thank you, Mr. Brayden. You were saying that you were going to ribbon cutting every month or so, right? And so
Correct.
I remembered, a few years ago talking about it being a little more of a concept and not coming to fruition, right? And so if you, when you send me the list, can also tell me kind of like, when they came online, if that's information that's easy enough for you, right? I'd be really into to see the increase, right? I've been sitting at this table for 10 years talking about the need for more affordable units, right? And we've had this conversation as a council talking about the need for more affordable units. So if it's easier to have the conversation, and certainly with our constituents and for us as policymakers, if we can show kind of what has been accomplished and where, so we can really see where are we now, so we can keep kind of moving the goal, so we can see where we're getting to. That would be helpful. I didn't ask how many vouchers, individual-based vouchers. I know what the waiting list is, but not how many people have them. So how many people have a voucher and are looking for a unit to rent?
We have about 5,100 vouchers on the street
Got it.
and or leased.
Lease, right.
Yeah.
Or so they're in a unit.
place, Right.
Got it. And I just want to give a shout out before, and I'll wrap up because
She got more information.
okay, yeah, but I'm going to let my other members have their time too. I'm going to try to wrap up. I really do want to say congratulations and thank you for the tiers, the 6 tiers, right? Because again, it was years ago we were at this table, and especially when we were struggling to craft the inclusionary zoning legislation to understand what is our AMI versus what are the real kind of sub-markets within the city, right? And using that broad area was not sufficient to really make affordability truly affordable for people, right? And so I know it was just an internal study that showed that within each tier, the voucher in 70% of the time is over the market rate for that tier. And so I want to say congratulations. And I will not take more time today, but I probably will also nudge you to figure out what census tracts are in each tier, because I kind of love to map things in my own mind, right?
We send a map to the council every 6 months, but we'll send a map that depicts.
Thank you. I missed it.
Yeah, we're getting that one out.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's wonderful news. I really appreciate that, because that is really, I think, kind of a big jump to have the tier system compared to where we were a few years ago. So.
Yeah, and I want to thank you guys for having those discussions years ago to push the housing authority to achieve what we're achieving now. And like I said, it's more to go. I mean, it's not been like a waiting game, but right now we're seeing the impact. Affordable housing is coming online like every 60 days, and we are nationally known for doing this. So thank you for your comments years ago.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Sure, thank you. Councilwoman?
Thank you all for being here today. My question, I really just have one question, and that is probably a clarification. I hope that you're able to answer. It might be something that Chief Chintalopoulos would be better suited to, but I hope you can. And that is, when we are talking about newer, what I think a lot of people would assume would be market rate development coming online, and then a deal is worked out either because of a mandate like inclusionary zoning or public pressure and a commitment to affordability. So I think of first the Meridian project in the district I represent, the old Shakespeare Giant Eagle project. Their commitment was it's under construction now, 240 units, and they said we will take vouchers for 100% of our units. Now, that was a commitment they made through Planning Commission. Or I also think of, say, what never came to fruition for a lot of different reasons, but Oakland Crossings in Councilman Charlin's district. Again, the agreement that was worked out to say a certain percentage will be affordable was, I believe, through the acceptance of vouchers. Would those be then tenant vouchers or project-based vouchers in those kind of scenarios that you're seeing more with this, like an agreement with the city?
I have to get back to you because we got lots of deals out there going on right
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
And the requirement of 10% set aside for affordable housing with market rate. Most of those developers are covered to talk to us about it, to make a decision to use project-based voucher, which is a better deal for them because they can go and borrow money for it.
Okay.
And help them with their financing.
So more likely to be project-based than tenant-based?
Yeah,
you
it
say?
could be either or.
It could be
but,
either.
But,
Okay.
but I think they're still trying to meet the city requirement. And like I say, some of them are applying for the project-based vouchers, gap financing, or regular vouchers. And we have a long list of them, and I just have to know which one you're talking about.
Okay.
I can't remember all of them. I know she can, but I can't.
Yeah.
It's both?
It can be.
It can be both.
It could be both.
But those developers are talking to the housing authority.
Yeah.
And they are putting proposals in.
It was a good
Okay.
reminder for me to talk with the developer for the Meridian
And we work
make
with-
sure that,
And we're close with Cal and URA too.
of course.
Right.
Yeah, okay. That was really my only question. I'll leave it
Thank
to
you.
others in on the panel here. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Councilman?
Thank you so much for hosting this, Councilwoman Rourke. I'm learning a lot as we go through this process here. I want to make sure that a couple things, as I'm kind of learning some of the terminology, as Councilwoman Gross mentioned, making sure that I have a couple things right. When you said there were 5,100 vouchers in the street,
It's leased. I should have said leased.
so 5,100
5,100,
individuals that are currently receiving the voucher and are in a unit.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. How many are receiving a voucher and not in a unit?
How many are searching?
Yes. And an estimate's fine. Just
I would say about 765 approximately.
Okay.
Are out searching, the last numbers that I remember looking at.
okay. That
And I can clarify that for you, the number of searching.
that is helpful for me, and sometimes the searching is because of maybe an individual's choice of where they want to stay, or because there's not a unit available. It could be either.
Let me say this. So our last study indicated that if we gave out 100 vouchers, 33% of the people would lease up. They would find a place. Okay. We have not done a study. We'll wait till get another CUM intern, and I think that number have improved. In most cities, 90% of people looking for housing with vouchers, they can find a place. We have enhanced our relationship with landlords. We have enhanced the payment standards. We have put programs in that benefit landlords so we can get more affordable housing. So we must go back and look at that number and say, if we issue 100 vouchers, how many people are leased up? In the last 2 years, that was 33 out of 100, 33%. And we have 5,100 people leased up now, but we have probably this morning 100, maybe 140 who already gave us applications, already gave us contracts with landlords, and we process them. And then, like I say, the remaining, you got some looking, some being processed, and some that are housed. What's the number? 142. 142 as of today that have found a place, married up with the landlord, and housing authority processes those contracts now. So we average about 142 every day, to be honest about it. I mean, because they be moving on, but bottom line, we're constantly doing inspections, having contracts. It's an ongoing process, and we have speed up that process.
So, again, I'm learning things. So please excuse my ignorance
Yeah,
as
no
I'm trying to learn something. who actually is it that approves an individual for receiving a voucher?
Yeah, so our occupancy department starts the process.
So, but it's housing authority. that-
Oh,
the housing
yes, the
authority.
housing authority, yes.
So if I'm low income and I want to get a voucher, I'd go to the housing authority to receive that.
If the list is open, the list is closed now, we took in, I think, what, 13,000?
Somewhere along.
And that would take us probably 4 to 5 years, and then we would reopen again, the waiting
Okay.
list.
So you close the list. So you take in 13,000, as you said,
Yeah, somewhere around there.
and then you close the list, and then people have to wait until the list opens up again.
Yes, they can also, if one of the project-based vouchers, project-based voucher lists are open, they could apply for a project-based voucher. Again, it's separate than the tenant-based voucher, and/or we also encourage people to look at our low-income public housing units.
Okay.
And that's like 96 to 97% occupied at all times.
Sure.
Public housing units.
Okay.
And mixed finance.
Well, I mean, so that's interesting, and you keep it closed for years.
The
Go ahead.
The housing choice voucher waiting list?
Yeah.
Yes, we
Okay.
close it again. We try to, we don't want to give people false hope. We don't want to open it on day one. Whenever we open it, we get thousands of people. So we try to be fair in opening it. So we don't want to open it one day. We want to keep it open so people can get the word. We usually advertise a minimum of 2 weeks ahead of time in at least one newspaper of majority circulation, and then another newspaper. We advertise on our website. We advertise on all aspects of the Housing Choice Voucher social media platforms, and we also have in our communities, we have billboards where we can do electronic signing, as well as in our one-stop shop, and we advertise there as well. We also sent information to different community groups that the waiting list was open. So we did that, as I stated, for a week, 24/7, and then we stopped, and that's when Mr. Benyon is saying we got about 13,000 responses. So it's, we don't want to give people false hope by just keeping the waiting list open, because as he stated, it can take us approximately 5 years to get through that waiting list. And of course, a lot of people will drop off. We're constantly purging the waiting list. Are you still interested?
So the part on the contracts, one thing you need to know is that once you have an inspection, the housing authority do not tell you when to move in. Now, it's a business decision between the tenant and the landlord. If they move in, the housing authority would pay retro back to between the 1st and the 15th. We pay those retro payments. We have some contracts are completed in 5 days, and some go all the way up to 59 days, some go a little bit more. It depends on the three people I talk about, the landlord, the housing authority, and the tenant. If everybody doing everything right, we can process this stuff fast. But if there's any type of glitch related to compliance for HUD, then it's a slowdown.
That's helpful. I don't think I fully grasp that concept. One of my community leaders is at the table today, and
Okay.
Ms. Clark, we've talked a lot about problems that you've had with your units in the past year, and some of the challenges that you've had. You mentioned to me a lot about the delays. So, for example, I think if I'm stating this correctly, there was a tenant that you were not receiving payment from anymore, and you couldn't evict them, and had a hard time getting them out of the unit, and you weren't receiving payment from the housing authority. Am I remembering that right? You're making faces as if maybe I'm not.
Yeah. My tenants in regards to the first two House Choice Voucher programs, first participants. The processing did take within the 60 days that HUD had required. Mine was, I think the first one was more of a judgment of her having the judgment and being able to move out. That was during COVID. So, and then the second one was a veteran and
Right.
a House Choice Voucher. And she moved out, but we still had problems in regards to same issues of lease violations. And all three of them have been lease violations. Like Mr. Beaman, they have improved in regards to the processing, but it wasn't so much of the difficulty of the payment as it was in lease violations that I was having with my tenants and communicating with Housing Authority to get some resolution or some assistance. I think Ms. Grayson has always said to us that because of the fact we were privately owned, it was on the landlord to take the tenant to the magistrate to have them evicted. My thing is when we address the problem to housing, I feel like they should take and help us being private landlords in regards to what the situation is. Unit occupancy, doing what, housekeeping and whatever. If I make you aware of a situation, I feel you should be able to help me because in the guidelines, it states this is what is the requirement of that tenant. So that's where we come into a conflict with, as landlords, when we deal with the Housing Authority. That's our biggest issue with it. So mine was more of a lease,
Sure.
lease violation more so than anything with the housing.
Okay. But that did keep your unit empty for a while, am I correct?
I did, but that was due to the damage because of each in between the two.
Because the tenant damaged the unit?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. And does the housing authority do any program to remediate that? No, nothing.
No,
No.
no, not at all. My thing with that, and I think we discuss that all the time, which I just got a clarification on the water bill as to why. It's been two years. I finally got the answer to that, which Mr. Beam, I was looking for him to come back to the meeting to tell us when he talked with the water company whether or not it could go under the tenant's name. But unfortunately, because of the fact it can't travel with that tenant, so the landlord is still responsible for that water bill. With that being said, why is the tenant allowed to move to their next place and there is a family obligation, as they call it, it's not taken care of?
Right, so that is,
Closer, get the mic, yeah.
that's always, it's a common issue, because in essence, with private landlords, we act as a bank, right? So the obligation of the tenant, as Ms. Clark said, is to live up to your family obligations. The main ones, and the ones in her particular case, pay your rent, and if you're responsible for utilities, pay the utilities. There are a lot of other involved, but that's what we're talking about now. And on the landlord part, as Mr. Binion said, that triangle, the landlord is responsible for making sure that house meets housing quality standards. What we do is when the tenant is doing what they're supposed to do, the landlord is doing what they're supposed to do, we give the landlord our portion of the contract rent. The tenant is responsible for their portion of the contract rent. Now, when the tenant makes a breach, that's a landlord-tenant issue. That breach of that contract is landlord-tenant. And so the landlord has to take the tenant to court. Once the landlord gets a final judgment, then we verify that that judgment is final, and then and only then are we allowed to terminate that tenant from the program. So sometimes it takes a while for various reasons. You know, you can get, you guys know, if you try to evict somebody, you get a judgment, then they can appeal 10 days, and then they can appeal again, and so forth and so on. So it can take a while to get someone out. And by that time, because we don't have a final judgment, HUD says you need to keep that person moving. And so that person could now be in another unit, but whenever we get that final judgment, we send that person a 30-day termination notice to get them off the program. And they have a right to a grievance hearing, and all this is, you know, based on HUD
Payment
regulations. Yeah.
Payment arrangements.
And I have one quick thing to add to that. The housing authority is not a signing party on the lease. The lease is signed just by the tenant and the landlord, and then the housing authority signs a housing assistance payment contract, which is a separate document between the housing authority and the landlord. So we don't actually have any legal authority to enforce the lease.
That's a question. You don't have any authority to, you said you don't have any authority to enforce the lease, but we are literally using your lease.
Oh,
You know, all the
can-
leases come
okay.
from housing authority.
Okay, so we can use your lease. A legal department needs to approve it. I think years ago, everybody had different lease. So we took a standard HUD lease, and most we decided to use that. And then I believe in our administrative plan, we put, if you have your own lease and our general counsel approve your lease, we can use your lease.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
Okay, my thing in regards to when you say that because my one tenant was for a whole year, she's had her judgment. So, but she has continued to have her voucher.
Well, we can talk after this.
And the other thing too, that we, because of the Federal Privacy Act, the housing authority may in fact be following our rules, not our rules, but HUD rules, but we can't tell the landlord what we're doing with that tenant unless we have written permission from that tenant. So that causes a lot of issues. All we can say is, generally speaking, here are the rules, and the housing authority is following rules. We can't tell you where we are or anything of that nature. So that kind of, that's not nice to hear. A lot of times it's not, okay, well, what's going on?
About to say something, go ahead.
I lost my train of thought.
Let's pretend this is a civic council meeting. Go ahead.
I'm hearing, okay, so what you're saying is that if there are issues that we have and we present them to you all, that we have to go to the magistrate to take and deal with them because you can't resolve the situation. So what good is the mediation if we can't come to you all when we have a problem or an issue?
Are you talking about just mediation?
What's the purpose of the mediation? To be able to get the problems resolved, particularly if we have a tenant that is violating the lease.
Mm-hmm. I think and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're talking about the just mediation that may have been brought to one of the landlord meetings, that if there's a problem between the landlord and tenant, we use this on our public housing, with our public housing tenants, and we've tried to expand this to the Housing Choice Voucher program, where the landlord and the tenant would sit down and discuss the issue. So again, as Ms. Howard stated, we're not a party to that lease. And so we can't enforce the lease. We can't go to court and enforce that lease agreement. We can for our properties, and we do. And we've had a lot of success with the mediation with our properties. People, going on payment plans, paying rent, or yes, I did damage your property, so and here's the judgment. Okay, I'll pay this off. But we don't have that leverage with Housing Choice Voucher landlords. and one of the things that we encourage people to do, landlords especially, is to get a security deposit from the tenant. Now, there's a lot of agencies, if the tenant themselves does not have the money for the security deposit, there are a lot of agencies that do provide for security deposits. In one of the programs that we had that is full now, the Emergency Housing Voucher Program, with those we were able to, we went through the Urban League, but we were able to also have security deposits, pay security deposits on behalf of those tenants. And in addition to that, we do have an incentive that has, it's not widely used, but we do have an incentive for tenants who, we can give them a security deposit. We can pay the landlord security deposit minus, I believe it's $99, so that we don't have to, keep a separate bank account for each of those. So, but there are the churches, different community groups, places that pay security deposits. So a lot of times, landlords feel that persons that are low income can't do certain things, but that's not quite correct. There are various resources, so that if the person, damages the place, then there's a recourse that they can have that security deposit. And what I found, subsidized or not, people are people. and so I don't want to, paint a picture that persons that are, have subsidized housing do any more damage than people who are market rate. I've personally seen both. And so get a security deposit. It's the best example, and nobody lives anywhere for free. So, nobody stays, some landlords wait for a contract, the contract to be signed, but if you're allowing somebody to move in before the contract is signed, get some rent. It doesn't have to be, the whole contract rent, but you can get something. You know that this is a subsidized program, and historically it's 30% of the person's, gross income. So how much is your income? Well, I make X, Y, Z. Well, 30% of that is this. I need you to pay this until the contract comes through. Well, I don't have any income at all. Well, we have a minimum rent of $150. If you present a hardship, that's something else, but at least give me $150. Give me $100. Give me something to stay in my unit until the contract is signed.
I do want to, I think Councilwoman Warwick has some more questions here, but just one kind of broad topic that I'd be curious in everyone's opinion of this. When we talk about new developments coming in the city, not that frequently anymore, but when we are building things, one of the things we talk about is will this new building take vouchers? And a lot of new buildings don't want anything to do with the voucher system. I am not convinced that it is because the buildings don't want people in their buildings that would use vouchers. I've heard more frequently that it is more challenging for them to go through the system, and they just don't want to use it. Do you think that is the case, or and if so, what can we do to make it less painful for developers to use the voucher system?
Well, I think that's changing. I think that developers, as they get educated on it, there's stigmas associated with these type of programs. And then when they start talking about the financing part, everybody don't know all the answers, and there's some misinformation. The Housing Authority, my staff, we sit down and talk to these developers almost every week. And when they start looking at the finance part of it, how they can enhance their financial situation, we also talk about how you process people, different programs. So it's kind of like there's an understanding of something that you think might be but it's not really what it is because of past information. But when these developers sit down with the Housing Authority, URA, and other partners, those pictures change. I mean, just right now, housing authority, a whole lot of cases, we pay more than market. And we are improving our programs. And, you know, the city is requiring, I believe, a 10% set aside. And they're knocking on our door every day. Pretty soon I'm gonna run out of vouchers. That's what we're concerned about now. She's my voucher counter, and every day she'll be saying, slow down. We're gonna run out of vouchers. So right now, it's a race to get project-based vouchers. And we have lots of contractors. I mean, we got people lined up. So that's one side of the story, but the reality, if this is gonna be an affordable housing city to assist everyone who needs affordable housing, we can work with those developers and correct misinformation. And like I said, we sit down with anyone. You know, our thing at the Housing Authority, if you want to talk to us, you can talk to us. You want to talk to me, I talk to everybody. Sometimes it might take a time to get to me, but the bottom line, anyone that want to talk about affordable housing, anyone who have any new imagination or activity to create affordable housing, the door is wide open. We have lots of flexibility. And any imagination that you have, we try to make it work. So,
Thank you.
yeah. So anyone have concern about affordable housing, those developers, just send them over to the housing authority.
I could probably talk about this all day, but I do. Councilwoman Work's been nice enough to let me have this amount of time, so
Okay.
I'll pass it back to her.
Yeah, no, please. So I guess I do, yeah, so I definitely have some sort of process questions. So I mean, we're hearing here, 5 units unoccupied between December and April, right? Like 5 project-based units. And I understand about you've got people on a bunch of different waiting lists. So, I mean, what is it because that is a huge issue, right? So if I have a new building, I'm ready to go, doors are open, and I've got a unit sitting empty, and it's not the first time that I've heard that, right? So I've got a unit sitting empty, and I'm waiting on the housing authority, and I understand there's wait lists, like, Gladstone School opens up, the wait list opens up, and everyone jumps on it, and then this other one opens up, and so what is it in and if anyone else wants to come back to the table what is it in the process that is making it so that we don't have people ready to go and get into those units? I mean, we know the units are coming, right? If they're being built, and we know the units that are available are available, so.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, we got more work to do, I would say that. But for example, if we have waiting lists, and we pull 100 people, we got to process 100 people. Some of those people are not going to show up. We still got to go through that process. It's a time consumption in processing people. That's how we consistently purge the list. Then we might purge someone, then they come, we then back on the list. It's a whole lot to get to that point. And I know it sounds simple. It sounds simple to me, but it's really complex. And we need more work to do. I mean, I don't have all the answers today, but if we look at data, which we are trying to close that gap to get people in housing as fast as possible.
And one of the things I want to add that we did recently, within the last 3 months, hire someone to focus on project-based vouchers, to look at the waiting list, and it's a one point of contact person at this point that the developers can contact. And I believe there's been meetings with Ms. Hammond. Jalen Hammond is the new person that's over the project-based vouchers. And so that's one of the ways that we are addressing the question that you just asked.
I mean, is there a way to adjust? So I guess, I just sort of like want to dig in. So let's say, just for example, so there's 5 units available. Is there a specific list for example, Mr. Williams?
Each development has their own waiting list.
Okay, and then so you're calling 5 people. Is there a requirement that you give them a certain amount of time to get back to you?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, the first letter that goes out, people generally have 10 days to respond as to whether or not they're interested. and to bring in the information. If they don't, we send out one last letter, and then if they don't, we take them off of the waiting list. We would take them off of the waiting list.
So is there, I mean, again, like, I'm just kind of, and I'm not trying to solve the problem here, but it seems like, I mean, is there someone calling, like, just like, this morning I'm calling down all these 5 people until I get a hold of
I
someone?
would say, my answer to most of these things are, we probably got 10 people working in that department, and we got a waiting list of 33,000 people. I know that's not the right answer. By using technology, now we begin to start using AI, to improve that process. Only thing I can say is we will continue to reduce that number of time that a person has to wait from the time that they get to housing. Some cases it's 11 days, some days it's 5 days, sometimes it could be 100 days. But if everything works right, it's really 5 days. But it's always something. So only thing I can say is we will continue to improve, continue to hire staff, take advantage of AI, and make sure our people are trained, and we use different things to contact people. We call people at their house, and we do Zoom with them too, to make sure that we get these processes done. Sometimes we have the landlord on the Zoom, sometimes we have the resident, we have everyone. Believe me, we tried everything possible to put people in housing. And like I said, and I know this, I'm not trying to say excuse, but we process a lot of people, lots of people.
So, okay, so I get it, because I'm trying to look at this from sort of the perspective,
Right.
well, also of your existing landlord. So if there is a project-based voucher, so you've committed, so this developer or landlord has committed this unit to the voucher program, right, to being an affordable unit. If you can't fill it, do you back pay the months that you're not able to fill?
There's we have a 2 months vacancy payment
Right.
that comes into play. And so for project-based vouchers only. So the other thing that I want to say is that it's a partnership as well. So if I know that I'm evicting somebody, as one of the developers, I need to let occupancy know that I'm evicting this person, then they can know, okay, so I need to gear up because, this development is gonna have a vacancy within the next, hypothetically, 60 days. But as Mr. Binion said, it's a process that we're trying to work on. As a matter of fact, two things that have developed. We're working with the Emphasis system to have a tenant portal through Emphasis, and that will enable.
It's our core software.
Right, so that will enable, the landlords can now, put in when they're having a vacancy, well, no, landlords can look at their properties, but we're working with Emphasis Elite to continue to get more technology to make the systems run faster.
So, okay, and I believe it was mentioned earlier, so there's like tenant housing specialists, and then there's also a landlord, like, so does each landlord have sort of like a single point of contact?
No,
Each housing specialist could have, their caseload is about 500 tenants.
Well, right, but what I mean is, does a landlord or a tenant have like the one person that they call,
Yes.
like the one person?
Yes.
Is that your experience?
I mean, with my property, we have two. We have
Okay.
two. They're both new. I mean, they're both new. I mean, since they've been on board, I've really kind of had good progress with them. When I call them,
Great.
they return my calls. We discuss things. So, these two. But I mean, a lot of times, I don't know. Some of them get overwhelmed, and I don't know what the process is, and I can't speak for what happens on that side. But I know previously, I think another thing that I don't know if anybody ever thought about is when you do turnover, what ends up happening is the person that you're getting rid of or that's leaving, the tenant may have communicated with that person, and it doesn't appear that the paperwork they communicated with that person is being moved to the next person. and then that tenant is kind of falling through the cracks in terms of their paperwork, and they're getting put on a thing like, you know, they're telling me I didn't do this, or they stopped paying my rent because they said I didn't do this. I turned all my paperwork into this person. I'm like, well, that person's not there anymore.
Well,
So-
what I would say is that those gaps, through technology, we have reduced a lot of that stuff. Most of the tenants, they do stuff online. They send stuff to us, they come down and drop. I mean, this conversation, I gave somebody something, you know, most of the time, that could be possible, but as you know, when we was going through our transition, some of those people, that's why they're not there, because of those situations. But I think that by using technology, we've been able to reduce that conversation. I gave somebody something else. And then I always try to keep 2 additional housing specialists available who are trained, so when someone leaves, I don't have to worry about that train up time. That was that lesson learned, that when people leave, would create that type of chaos. Okay. And so we have a bench, a reserve bench. So somebody leave, plug someone right in there to be able to pick that work up and keep it going. And like you said, I'm glad you compliment, you know, the 2 new people who probably have been there less than 6 months. They take the job to do 2 years, and I'm glad that you have great interaction with them. Okay.
So, I mean, do you have, so there's the landlord portal, which is great. I'm all about online. I know,
Right.
you know, it's not for everyone, but I'm sure the vast majority of landlords like to just be able to look it up in the system and, you know, do most things without having to pick up the phone. Do you have a CRM, like in the back end, like, can I sit down, you know, if I'm specialist A versus B, can I sit down and just log in with specialist B information, and that inbox pops up and I'm like, okay, so I'm covering for them today, so I've got that inbox in front of me and I can just work through.
I can tell you, I feel good about this. You can pick any tenant. In 30 seconds, I'm gonna tell you everything that's going on with them. If I got a computer in front of me, I mean, that's how much data we process.
Okay.
I mean, when landlords do call, I can sit there and put up on my computer, because we have duplicate systems where people put information in. I can tell you exactly where it's at. If it's in inspections, it's not like stuff is lost. And then I can go in and see what the housing specialist is saying. Could say this person needs so and so. And then we have a quality control department. So once we get finished with the contracts, it goes to quality control. Quality control might find some issues, and it might come back. And so we do have a robust system, but we constantly try to reduce that time. Mm-hmm. And as people get trained, you reduce the time, because there's so many regulations, so many. And our staff have, like I said, it takes 2 years to learn this job. And I think that most of them is probably less than, probably come up on what, about 13 months? Where you at, LaShonda?
Right there.
Yeah, about 13 months. Matter of fact, she have a chart that say, when you say, LaShawn, was 90% are trained now?
Yes, sir.
And 6 months ago, we was 30%?
Yes, and we had two
Right.
new housing specialists that just started training.
So, if it's possible, in the future, 6 months from now, whatever, you want to revisit this,
Okay.
we open to that.
Okay.
So,
Ken, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd just say that the communication between the housing authority and the landlord about the stage of the process and that communication doesn't translate, and usually doesn't translate. I mean, our property manager is telling us 4 months from I have a tenant who wants a unit, we submit the paperwork to the housing authority. Day one, we submit it to the housing authority. 4 months later, we have a scheduled inspection date. And,
I disagree
and there's
with-
a
I
lot of
disagree with
breakdowns
you,
that can
Ken.
happen there. And what I'm hearing is that from our property managers and others that I've talked with is that they don't hear when a mailing was sent to a tenant, they don't hear that it went to them. They think it's moving fine. They can't look on their portal and see the tenant and the tenant's process getting through their paperwork. There isn't this automatic communication. If they're calling to their housing specialist, they're not getting calls returned back as fast. The experience from the landlord, one of the major landlords of the city I talked with about this has a lot of units in the county, and he says the county, I get calls back the next day, day two later. Things at the housing authority sometimes go fine, but sometimes they fall into a black hole. And so, saying you got all the tenant data, that's good, but there should be a tenant portal that is linked to the landlord when they submit that RAFTA, so that any time there is a document or something that's going out, the landlord, the property manager, has the ability to ping the tenant, to follow up, because your staff can't be everywhere, but the landlord's got a real vested interest to get that paperwork done right and on time.
Okay, I agree with you. And it used to be like that. And I agree with you. We have 60 days from the time that you process, work with the tenant, work with the landlord. A whole lot of landlords will ask stuff to go quicker, and we are trying to do that. But right now, under the contract, the policies and procedures, 60 days. Now, for a long time, we had lots over 60 days, and that's the transition I was talking about. So right now, that's why we're gonna come back in 6 months. You hold on to that thought, and we see, will you be able to repeat it? And I wanna be able to stop you from repeating it, because you're gonna say we're doing a great job, okay?
Yeah, I think attention to that data system and how we use landlords in that data system could be really helpful
So
in
the
getting after
the
that.
one barrier, Kendall, is the Privacy Act, the Federal Privacy
yes.
Act. We can't give landlords information about the tenant. We can't say, Ms. Jones did not submit her income, and so this is holding up the process. Now, if Ms. Jones gives us permission, and Mr. Binion said,
I would just say 60 days, and Ms. Jones don't give us the stuff, and Ms. Jones we get a termination letter.
Yeah, I think you
So-
could have.
That's-
I think you
and-
could have a way that the
right.
landlord could know that there was something that went out to the housing authority, that the housing authority sent something to the tenant that they're waiting for, and the landlord can call the tenant and say, "Hey, I don't know what it is. Housing authority says they're waiting on something from you."
So what I would say, and there's lots of landlords that I interact with, I would get on the phone, I would call that tenant, and I'll call that landlord. We got a three-way conversation. We can do that on Zoom or whatever. Then that way I am not violating the Privacy Act. And when you talk to your peers out there, they probably tell you they talk to me one-on-one. So, and they won't try to do it. They try to talk to my staff, but sometimes will come to me.
So I have a question. So let's
Right.
just say a tenant
Right.
sends some paperwork. So I just sent my ballot the other day, right? And I got an email back.
Yeah, I
It
did.
said
Yeah.
received, ballot received. Do tenants get that? So if tenant sends you whatever, is there some kind of notification that they can get that it's received if they have email or text?
It's not 100%, and I agree with you. The same thing happened to me when I went to vote, got that right away. And we are I'm going to a conference next week on our system, and that's one of the questions I'm going to ask them.
Okay.
I think that's great.
So maybe for landlords, that would be a question kind of upfront is, hey, can you just check the box that says that I can ask the housing authority what's going on with you so that we can, so I know that it's, we've been talking for a long time. It's getting late, but I do just have a couple more. So
Okay.
just generally speaking, so let's just say there's me and I have my tenant, right? Like I have a unit, I have a tenant. Well, let's just say I've never done a voucher program before. Ahead of time, can I come get my unit inspected? Pre-inspection, and how
yes,
long?
we can do a pre-inspection. The pre-inspection lasts for 90 days.
Okay.
And as long as you turn in a RAFTA within that 90 days, then the pass inspection is good. Now, if I come out, you ask for a pre-inspection, I come out, and Ms. Burton is here, she can speak more to this is her department, but if I come out, do a pre-inspection, your unit fails, we do not come back again until you actually have a tenant and you have a RAFTA. But if your unit passes the first time, you're good within 90 days. However, the effective date of your contract does not start until you turn in that RAFTA. Your unit does not have to be re-inspected, but the effective date of the contract is when you turn in the RAFTA, and some landlords get confused with that.
So, okay, so, and how long does it take just to get someone, so just inspection? So just like nothing else, I'd like you to come out and check out my unit. I'm interested in participating. Pre-inspection. A day or two, okay. So, 1 to 2 days, and then, okay, so I pre-inspection, let's say I'm approved, right, I don't have to change anything, I'm good, you know, my unit's good. And now I have a tenant, right? I go, whatever, I post it on Craigslist, I say I accept vouchers, now I get a tenant. So now I have a tenant. How long does it take to get, so there's what, 60 days to get the contract?
Then you turn in your request for tenancy approval.
Okay, so I turn in the RAFTA.
Turn that in. That's processed to make sure you have everything up there, that you've signed everything, the tenant has signed everything, who's paying utilities, what the rent's gonna be, if the rent meets rent reasonableness. And once that's done, then that's assigned to one of the housing specialists to begin the completion of the contract.
Okay, so how long assuming everyone has done what they're supposed to do, right? Forms are completed correctly and all of that. So how long from the time, so 1 to 2 days, I've got my pre-inspection, I've got my tenant, I sit down with my tenant, we fill out the RAFTA and send it to you. How long does it take to get the contract?
1 to 10 days for the RAFTA.
Oh, for the RAFTA, we talking about the contract.
1 to 10 days to sort of approve the RAFTA.
Right, to go through and approve the RAFTA, depending on how many RAFTAs she has to process for that, because this, go ahead.
Let me do this. I think the better way to say this for us, we have 60 days to do the process. Some people finish in 5 days, some people finish in 49 days. And I don't know what our average is right now, but I know our average is down. So what we would do is, well, I recommend that we come back in 6 months, and I would have that data and depict, you know, which direction that we are going.
Yeah.
But right now, our process is 60 days, and would that's include the inspection, the contract, the inspection, the contract, sign the contract, and processing the payment. Payment is normally after 60 days, but the person who signed that contract signs them all the time. At McDonald's, everywhere, because we got, like I say, you like technology. The contracts come across my phone, and I'm signing them constantly.
Okay.
And so payments is processed right away once that contract is signed.
And so my understanding too is that there is, so like, from the time you have the RAFTA, can the landlord expect, I mean, even if it comes later, once the contract's signed, can they get the rent for the time that they've been waiting to get the
Yes.
contract?
Yes,
Once the unit passes.
once the unit passes inspection.
Once the unit passes inspection, so I pass inspection, my RAFTA is approved. Then even though I'm not getting the rent today, that is, I'm
We
banking
catch it
it.
up, right, you
I'm
banking it. You banking it.
Okay, so I mean, I just wanted, just for the sake of, and can you pull up the map and what you can make on units? Or even just the map would be.
Some from the presentation that you did.
Right, you go.
You can just pull up the presentation.
Because I'm curious, just for argument's sake, right? Like what tier, I'll just take Squirrel Hill, right?
Squirrel
If you
Hill.
zoom into like Squirrel Hill, what tier that is and what you could get for a 2-bedroom unit in Squirrel Hill.
Share. Okay, so let's go into Squirrel Hill. Oops. This is pretty sensitive.
5217, I don't know if you can do it.
Right. I would have to have an address, but we're here. There's Squirrel Hill.
Our building in.
So we have Squirrel Hill South, Squirrel Hill
Yeah,
North.
Squirrel Hill South is fine, yeah.
Okay. Click on a census tract. The census tract's to tier 1.
Tier 1, okay, so what could I get for a 2-bedroom in Squirrel Hill?
For a 2-bedroom, it'd be $2,045.
$2,045. What about a 3-bedroom?
$2,597.
$2,597.
That's including all utilities.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah, you would have to subtract out any of the
Okay.
utilities the tenant's responsible for.
Okay, but it's still pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's still pretty good.
good.
So, I mean, that is very, but just as a regular landlord who is, you know, because I can put, you know, I can post my apartment on Craigslist and I got it rented in 2 days and I have a tenant in there, right? So, and I know that you know this, right? But this is what you're up against, right? Because that's the process just for any old landlord. So if we want to attract, I mean, the money is great, right? But if we want to attract those landlords, I don't know if there's, I mean, even just to think about fast tracking, getting on those new folks, because once you're on board, right, and you kind of know the system, you're like, okay, I'm getting paid, I'll get paid, maybe it's a little late, but it's coming in, you know, that,
Well, the plus is if you're a new landlord, and I think we still have the program, is it $1,000?
Units, new units.
Yeah, a new unit, we give you $1,000. And we had one program to attract landlords. It went so fast, I had to close it down. I mean, it went to $2 million in what? I don't know, 6 months. What was it?
2 million in 2 years.
Yeah, because we enhanced the payment standards. You had to put $6,000 worth of work in your unit. And when you put $6,000, we gave you a better payment standard. That program, everyone found out about it. We did increase the landlord. We stabilized the tenants and units, and it was very successful. We looking at another way to do it. And, I mean, we're constantly looking at ways to attract new landlords.
Yeah.
And like I say, I mean, we do have situations, but I would say that once the program's up and running, 95% of them are going to run very well. The tenant going to be there, people going to get paid, everything going to work out. But it's always, you know, in that bell curve, you're always going to have, you know, 10% or 15% there's going to be some type of issue.
yeah.
So
And then also curious, so, and tenants who have a tenant-based voucher, they are not eligible for a project-based unit?
say it again.
Or can they sign up for wait lists?
Yes.
They can do both.
They can do both?
Yes,
Yeah.
and if you have a project-based voucher for 1 year, you're eligible for a tenant-based voucher if you want to switch. But you have to lease up in a project-based unit for 1 year, and it depends on what waiting list you're on.
And how many vouchers we have, because the rule is, if you stay in the project base for a year and you want to leave, we will give you a voucher. And I don't even think of one time that has happened. And I think it was because of pet policy. But that's the only time. You know any?
Yeah, we have people,
Oh, we do? Okay.
yeah, more than one, but yes.
All right, that's the
don't
one I
the
know
number.
about. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, that's kind of my, what you're up against with your private landlord, right? Like and then also talking about these issues of, you know, if you have a tenant who's, I mean, even if the housing authority is connecting the landlord and tenant with those mediation services, like that definitely needs to be there because there is a stigma around taking vouchers. And I think landlords, you know, I know that Miss Clark has a very kind heart and wants to, you know, continue to give new tenants a try, but you shouldn't have to be a kind-hearted person to take advantage of this program. That shouldn't be a requirement, is that
Well-
you're, you know, that you're willing to sort of grit your teeth and bear it, right? Like the support needs to be there.
Coming from the projects, I was raised in the projects, but also knowing that someone always needs a helping hand. And even though I still have the same issues, and I've had 3 of the House Choice Voucher Program, hopefully that won't deter me from maybe helping another person, and that person be perfectly well. But as far as the issues that do go on and why we do have the problems that we do, we just want the housing authority to work with us and help to get the situation resolved. And that's, as you know, that's, as a landlord, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, you know, with your tenant, you have your tenant housing specialist. I mean, I don't know, I'm just thinking of things that that a tenant might be doing that would not necessarily just break the lease between the tenant and the landlord, but actually be breaking the rules of having the voucher in the first place.
And you have a
So
very seriousness
is
with
that something that the housing authority can intervene on? Like, I mean, just hypothetically, you've got 6 people living there and your vouchers, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the rules are for having.
Yeah, that's a problem. We will intervene if we have information and we can verify the information, yes, we will. But same situation, we would say that we would stop payment to the landlord. That don't mean that person actually going to leave.
Right, but
Right.
at that point, it would seem that I mean, again, building on the program to have that tenant specialist, right? That person who's sort of like the caseworker, we'll call them, for the tenant to call and be like, look, I'm hearing that you have, you know what I mean? These are the consequences of that if you can't remedy it,
Yes, it's kind of gray, but we look at that we support landlords, we support tenants, and we try our best not to have one take advantage of the other. So it's go back and forth.
Sure.
But we work with landlords one-on-one.
Yeah. I mean, it just, the money is good, and if the payments are regular, right, like that, because that's the hardest part of being a landlord, is collecting rent, right? Any landlord knows that. That is the hardest part. So that's the beauty of the program, is the rent is getting paid, right? That is consistent. But again, I know many landlords who would not be going in for attempt number 3 after a couple of bad experiences. And and then also, of course, on the project-based side, as we're talking about having these conversations around inclusionary zoning and, building more housing in Pittsburgh, and, how can we do that? How can we get developers to include affordability without taking a haircut and all those kinds of things? If you've got these long waits to get, if they're going to be like, great, I'm ready, I've got whatever, 20 units ready to go, and there's nobody there for them. I know that you know this, but I do look forward to the next 6 months, and this is part of why I like working with Director Binion so much. But I think also maybe a pitfall from time to time is Director Binion is always ready to give you his cell phone number and solve your problem personally. But unfortunately, that is not right. Like, that's not a sustainable model, right? It has to be the system has to be there so that the system is able to do that, so that the director doesn't have to. So I want to say, does anyone else have any last comments before we go?
One comment that didn't come up yet is that we see that most families on Section 8 are very stable families, but there are some who have special needs.
Yeah.
And I think that deserves some additional attention.
Okay.
Because we've seen special needs families tend to fall through the cracks in the recertification processes and other issues going on because they actually have special needs.
Right.
They have special needs children, they have special needs themselves. And so just relying on the mail system to say, mail in your recertification now. Yeah. Like, I think we could work with the housing authority and the county to think about how we serve these special needs families better.
Yeah.
So that they don't end up at an eviction hearing because they didn't do paperwork because of their special needs or what else was going on in their life. I think that's a way that the housing authority could think about their systems to do something that is substantially creates more family sustainability and self-sufficiency, and think about how these Section 8 voucher holder tenants can get some of the other supportive services supports that are really making a huge difference in the choice neighborhoods locations, where we're seeing great outcomes among families who receive these supportive services alongside with housing.
Yeah.
And because that's really the real vision, is that families be more stable, they're more able to cover more of their rent over time, and that we align the supportive services programs between all the different agencies to just make it work better for the families.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that you've got quite, the technology needs to be, I mean, I know, I made an appointment at Quest for my mom this morning. I've already gotten like 3 texts reminding me that I made an appointment. You know what I mean? Like, I will get a million texts. Like, there's no way I'm forgetting about that appointment because it's constantly blasted out. So, like, the paper mail is probably not the best. It just takes too
I like the
too
text.
long.
I like the text.
The text reminders.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah, like you have not done this. You have not done this. Yeah.
Yeah, so just like you're talking about the voting, I think I got a text every day. Your address, then when we finally got it, then they say, I think they said something like, we still gonna keep bugging you until something else. I don't know what they were saying, but anyway, it's a good feedback, and I think that we start to move towards AI.
Yeah.
We understand it. We done some profiles, and like everyone else, everyone try to streamline processes by using technology,
Yeah.
and we're moving into that phase.
Great. Well, thank you so much to everyone, really, truly, for coming and taking the time to be here. And thanks to members, I know they had to go, but I am hopeful for the future, right? For moving forward. Also, as we're trying to encourage more development in Pittsburgh, that hand in hand, we're getting housing authority to a place where that can really be a partner, because that vision for, I believe in this vision for Pittsburgh, where we have neighborhoods where it is not just like all the affordable housing is over here, but where the housing is a mix, right? Where there's affordable housing everywhere, and that makes for a city that's much more diverse and dynamic. And that's sort of how Pittsburgh has been historically, and we'd like to keep it that way.
Well, when you see the map, you're going to see migration occurred over the last 10 years. You will see that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, so okay, having exhausted the business of this post agenda, they highlighted it for me. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.